Garen Emig and Bill Haisten, a couple of sports columnists for the Tulsa World, going to spend a little time with you via both video and audio. If you download the podcast, thanks for doing it, first of all. If you are uncertain how to go about that, you can catch anything that we put out as the Tulsa World sports staff, audio-wise on Apple, Spotify, or Google. I think most of you know the drill by now. Just get on there, download, like us so that you can keep catching our content moving forward, and we would appreciate it. Video every week on tulsaworld.com. Bill, we've got basketball in the spotlight certainly this week based on not just performances of the area teams, college basketball teams, and for that matter, high school teams, but conduct. We had Oral Roberts getting into it in the handshake line in a game against North Dakota State last week in Fargo and involved Paul Mills.
Yes, sir.
That wasn't cool. You were at the Owasso Booker T High School game over at Nate Harris Fieldhouse on Friday night. That got heated. You wrote about the combination of those two events had you writing something over the weekend for the World that I want to ask you about. And then it even nationally escalated. Your topic escalated because of what Juwan Howard did, and with some assistance from Wisconsin's coaches after the Wolverines game at Wisconsin yesterday. So first, tell us why you wrote what you wrote, and tell us what you wrote, and then we'll go from there.
Well, obviously, the Booker T, the Owasso Booker T incident occurred 24 hours after what had happened with ORU and Paul Mills. Bryce McKinnis, our beat writer for ORU in Tulsa, made an attempt to talk with Paul Mills Friday, and so did I. And neither of us was able to talk with Paul. He didn't return our calls, and which surprises me and disappoints me. And then, so that's fresh on my mind, right? And I go to this full, hot, energized gym Friday night to see an amazing game. And I wrote, too, that it was the best basketball atmosphere I've been a part of. I've been the best basketball atmosphere I've been in since the Trae Young Bedlam game 4 years ago, Garen, over at Stillwater. And it was, it's exactly what you want. It was, I don't know, 60-40 split on attendance, maybe 70-30. I don't know, but there's a lot of Owasso people there, lots of noise both ways. Every possession screams from one side or the other. Great game. But very, very physical game, very emotional game. Booker T's best player is a former Owasso Ram who transferred over the summer from Owasso to Booker T, Aaron Potter, who's a really interesting player. And I wrote about him for Sunday as well. So I saw some things during the game, and really this was a really top officiating crew. Like, you see in the, college basketball, you see certain officials at like a lot of big games, right? And you see these officials here at certain big games. And so there was a top crew, and yet I thought they let them get away with way too much with regard to language, physicality. There were some insanely physical exchanges that didn't get whistled in any kind of way. And I thought, wow, okay. And so I just sensed, I told myself as the game was about to come to an end, I made it a point to intently watch the handshake line, because you got highly charged young athletes who've been asked for 2 hours to be warriors, and then you want them to cross paths and shake hands and good game, and which, ideally that's the way it goes. Quick handshake, congratulations, see you in the playoffs, let's move on. And so toward the end of that handshake line, Garen, something was said, there was some commotion, and then it just went, like a grass fire on a windy day. It just went, it became a thing, and miraculously it didn't become a bad thing. And really, it's, the more I reflect on it, it's kind of a fluke that it didn't. But the teams were separated. Security did a great job of containing people who wanted to jump over the rail, even on the floor, and then getting those players separated. And then, people cool off. And I spoke with Brian Montanati, the Owasso coach, after the game, and with Eli Brown of Booker T after the game. And by then everybody was cool. But we talked about a variety of stuff. the postseason mostly, but I thought I should ask about the handshake line and whether we should reconsider the value of the handshake line. And both coaches said what they said. Eli said it's something we do need to consider. And Brian said, it's the first time in my basketball life I've ever experienced anything like this in a handshake line. But he said, we'll never put our kids in this situation again. We will read the room more effectively from now on. I'm paraphrasing now. We'll read the room more effectively. If the temperature's too hot to bring these guys together, we just won't do it.
Right.
The response from readers has been, the volume of responses has been tremendous. And ranging from, I can't believe you're serious to propose this or even ask the question to absolutely, hell yeah, let's get rid of it right now. And then the Juwan Howard thing yesterday, just, everybody at ESPN, all of the programming planners and just must have said, thank you, Lord, for Juwan Howard, because it gives ESPN like an all-day platform, all of their platforms, an all-day topic on Juwan Howard. So, and I haven't looked in an hour or two whether the Big Ten has made a decision regarding sanctions on those schools, Wisconsin and Michigan. I don't know. But there's a lot of calls for Juwan Howard to be suspended for the rest of the year and for the Wisconsin coach to be suspended for a game or two. So, yeah, kind of an ugly weekend for basketball.
So much to unpack here. I want to start with coach's responsibility, because that's sort of where I began in reflection, not just based on what you wrote over the weekend and what I saw with Howard and Guard and Michigan, Wisconsin. But again, dating back to last Thursday night, it was a case where you had some gamesmanship going on right toward the end of the game. North Dakota State stole the ball in backcourt, right? When it was settled. The Bison were up, 16, 18? I mean, clearly had the game in hand.
Right.
They violated sort of the code, right, in terms of finishing games of that sort. That's why I assume Mills was upset. So there's a problem in how the end of the game was handled, but as far as gamesmanship, and then there became a problem in conduct afterward, and that's where I think more of the blame goes from Dave Richmond, the North Dakota State coach, to Mills at ORU. So I can't. You can speak for what happened in the high school game at Booker T Friday, but it's a similar setup to the Wisconsin-Michigan fiasco, where you've got the Wolverines pressing, even though it's a lost cause, correct? Down the stretch.
Right.
Juwan Howard isn't backing off, probably should. Code dictates that you do, trying to make a statement. And then I guess Guard called timeout to counter what Howard was doing. And so again, you have coaches behaving outside the realm at the end of the game. And then of course, what happens after the fact with Howard, and his intention to look like was to walk by Guard in the handshake line, not even stop to shake his hand. Guard then reaches out and stops him, giving Howard an excuse to unload verbally on Guard. That draws the attention of Wisconsin coaches. That draws the right hand that Howard placed on a Wisconsin assistant. Bill, in the two college cases, the problem is not just that it's the coaches that were at fault down the stretch of games and then after the fact, but you saw the effect it had on their players. I didn't see any issues between ORU and North Dakota State players initially in the handshake line. So I watched video. I think our friend Caden McFarland posted video for us to watch. Right. I don't know where Caden got it, but I hadn't seen any until I saw Caden's video on social media, and I didn't see any issues player-wise. I didn't detect any issues at the end of the Michigan-Wisconsin game until Howard and Guard got into it. So
right.
Then it's if the players see their coaches escalating, they're taking their cues. Of course they are from their coaches.
Yeah. So
that's where I know emotion is high, and I know that you're upset that some things happened at the end of the game. But you can't. You've got it. You're a coach. You're in a responsible role. You've already got, in some cases, teenage kids looking for an excuse to sort of crack because of the emotion of the game, and you just handed them a big one. And I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I know I've said a lot, but just in terms of coach responsibility here, I wondered if I could get your feedback on that.
In both cases, I mean, there's the baseball is just got so many unwritten rules, and one of them is you don't steal a base when you're up 7 runs
Right.
in the 8th inning or 9th inning, whatever. And that's kind of what happened in both games with what transpired, with the cheap dunk at the end of the one game and the pressing and the timeout in the other game. I mean, both sides just chill. But with regard, you nailed it exactly. The epicenter of the activity of the controversy at each of the college games began with the head coaches. Head coaches in Wisconsin, and then head coach, it felt like with Paul, because if Paul doesn't like surge forward and wolf back at that, the North Dakota State kid was wolfing at Paul, and Paul obviously took exception. And it looked like Paul Mills surged toward the kid a little bit, right? I mean, what are you going to do, Paul? If nobody's between you and the big guy, what are you going to do? You're going to fight him? I mean, come on. Don't these coaches act all big and bad in the moment. And it sets the worst of examples. And it's not just an example you take away, that an athlete takes away and thinks, I'll think about that and think about how I'm going to process that. No, are you kidding? No, these are extremely, first of all, you're coming off a 2-hour or 2.5 hour battle on the floor. And so emotions are like high anyway. And of course, if an athlete sees his head coach in some sort of conflict, he's going to rush to the aid of his, and then you've got, you're going to seek out a guy. I remember that guy fouled me hard in the first half. You're going to go after him, and then you've got all hell breaks loose. So, not 100% agree. In the 2 college games, and to some extent, I would even extend that to in the college games. The head coaches were the root of all evil. They were. Were there mistakes made? Maybe on the floor that led to some stuff? Yeah, okay, but the timeout was unnecessary with that time and score, and pressing certainly was unnecessary with that time and score, and then at ORU anyway. So, but even with the high school coaches, I would say, even though 100% of your focus has to be on the next possession or coaching your team and trying to win, but there's got to be a part of you too that senses probably not a great idea to have these 2 collections of kids cross paths right now. I mean, if I'm thinking about it over there with Barry Lewis, somebody, and if not the head coaches, maybe administrator,
exactly,
somebody, Garen, on the 2 edges of the benches should be thinking, or sneak in there and say, Brian, let's skip the handshakes tonight. Eli, let's skip the handshakes tonight. So, and I think maybe, the high school coaches certainly seemed like they considered it a lesson learned. Both guys did. And so maybe when there's and there's a great chance, Garen, that they'll play again in 2 weeks. Well, in about 11 days for the right to go to state.
Gosh.
So, I hope it happens, because I right now, in my mind of the east side of the state, true contenders in 6A, I would have Owasso and Booker T as the top 2 teams. So I hope they play again, but I hope they play again. I don't want them to fight again. They didn't really fight, but we were that close to what could have been a really rough incident.
Okay, so then let's go on to the proposal that you suggested in the column, which was why not just do away with the tradition, the practice? And that's, I would imagine that's where a lot of your readers are. It's and some I imagine have thought to criticize the coaches for their roles in this, but be that as it may, I imagine you do have a lot of feedback along the lines of why go to that extreme. And I'll tell you this, it's something that there's some things about that suggestion that I hadn't thought of until A, I read what you wrote, and then B, I reached out to college coaches that I've gotten to know over the years just as a writer, and they think about things obviously different than you and I do, and are a little closer to the action, literally, in the case of post-game handshakes and congratulations and whatnot. And I've had more feedback just in those text exchanges today along the lines of we should do away with it than I expected. I'll be honest with you. I thought I'd get, I don't know if we have to go to that extreme. And I've seen, you know what? I think it's time we went to that extreme. And they've cited the NBA not doing it. Mm-hmm. They've cited we didn't do it last year with COVID. I don't know if, right. Everyone acknowledged each other. There just wasn't a physical interaction.
Yeah, you wave and move on.
And they have said, there have been more than one who has said, there are things that happen that people just don't know about. When you have it might look fine and it might go off fine 99% of the time, but there are things that are said even in that setting, that if it's taken the wrong way by a player typically, or even a coach, you have things like what happened in Madison or what happened in Fargo last Thursday.
Right.
So it's being, what I'm saying is this, I don't know if it'll go to a coach's board moving forward. I don't know if we'll see a change, but it has people even outside of our sphere here in Tulsa thinking.
Right. Well, I mean, at the high school level, it would go to a decision-making level only if, I think, if a high-profile game that was marred by a real bad fight, mm-hmm. Then I think there would be a lot more momentum for doing away with it. But one of the responses I got from a reader, he just said, it's a little league exercise. It's outdated and emotions are just too hot when the game comes to a close. In a lot of these games, a lot of them, it's a 25-point game and there's really, but even in those games, you nailed it. You think there aren't harsh, hateful things being said from one side or the other all night long? Come on now. And don't think that's a recent phenomenon. That's been going on. Henry Iba's boys were dog cussing the other side, and the other side was dog cussing Iba's guys. And that's a long time ago. So no, that's not a right now generational thing. That's been going on forever. So but what makes it feel a little more dangerous now maybe is that, you have these student sections that are full of excitable kids and they all think they're bulletproof and they want to jump over the rail and get involved. And, you got everybody shooting video and everybody's feels like they're on stage in the moment. And I just think I think it would take us about 5 minutes to get used to the elimination of it. And after one full season of it, we wouldn't even remember it. You just do away with it. Mm-hmm. And it's not an abandoned, like one person emailed and said, here's the answer, better parenting. I'm like, well, okay, but that would make everything better, not just basketball, handshake lines. That would make everything better, but don't hold your breath on that. Yeah. So, I say do away with it and let's get used to not having it and move on.
Okay. Well, speaking of moving on,
doesn't mean I'm not a proponent of sportsmanship, but you know what? An opponent falls on his rear end, help him up. You're crossing paths during the timeout and a kid has made an unbelievable play at the other end. Tell him that was a beautiful play, man, and keep moving on. There are little subtle, quick ways of acknowledging in a sportsman-like way the other guy without the handshake. It would, if it becomes a dinosaur, nobody would miss it. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't even think about it.
Moving forward, our focus will be back on games soon enough and figures, coaches. I've got the Bedlam game in Norman Saturday, which unless the Sooners pull an upset at Texas Tech, that's sort of their last lifeline about staying in the NCAA tournament race. They're about out of them based on their slide. And I know they lost Elijah Harkless for the rest of the season. That's unfortunate, but they weren't real competitive at Iowa State after the first 4 minutes of that game. That wasn't a good look. You're touching base with an old friend of not just yours, but the city's, I hear. Right. Tell us about that.
Well, Tubby Smith is retiring he after TU, I don't know if I can remember it in order, but he coached at Memphis, he coached at Texas Tech, he coached of course, Georgia and Kentucky.
Right.
Won a national championship at Kentucky. Anyway, he has retired as the head coach at his alma mater, High Point, a small school in North Carolina, which plays its home games, by the way, on Donna and Tubby Smith Court, which is fantastic. And then his son, Gigi, who played here in high school ball here in town and played for Tubby at Georgia, it will become the new head coach at High Point. So, no, I'll be writing about Tubby for the Sunday section, and Bryce McKenna's will be writing on Gigi, who, it seems like yesterday to me that Gigi was playing high school ball here in town, and now Smith is in his 40s and he's going to be the head coach at High Point. So, but Tubby, Nolan, Richardson, I don't know. I mean, it's like the big three at TU obviously are Nolan, Tubby, and Bill Self, right? But it's like an apples and oranges deal to try to say which one was the more important guy, because Nolan pulled the program out of the ditch and got the city excited about TU basketball. Wins the NIT in year one, sustains TU at a winning level, a winning and entertaining brand of basketball. And when you were a kid at the time, you remember what it was like. TU basketball was a very hot, popular commodity at the time. And then there's a little lull with JD Barnett, although they went to the tournament a couple of times. And then they bring in Tubby Smith from Kentucky, Orlando Tubby Smith. We actually referred to him in early stories as Orlando. And putting quote marks, Tubby Smith.
Right.
Couple of seasons to build toward what happened in year three. And then year three was just unbelievable. The famous Arkansas game downtown at the convention center. I gestured toward downtown like the reader knows I'm looking toward the north here. Ridiculous. And then, obviously they get hot. They get in as an at-large, the final at-large team to get in the bracket that year in '94, and they go to the Sweet 16. And not only do they go to the Sweet 16, but they do it in unbelievably dramatic fashion. Upset UCLA. They really beat the crap out of UCLA. And then Lou Dawkins hits the corner three to beat Oklahoma State, and they go dance on to the Sweet 16, where if they had faced about any other team in the country other than Arkansas in the Sweet 16, they might have advanced again. And then Tubby's second team goes right back to the Sweet 16.
Right.
So that set TU on a course to have been the best mid-major program in the country for 10 years. And then Bill Self, after 2 years of Steve Robinson, and Steve did a fine job, but Steve bolted after 2 years. Bill Self swoops in there, builds on that momentum, adds a couple of pieces, really critically important pieces, and then comes within 2 baskets away from going to the Final Four in 2000. So I can't say that any one of those 3 coaches is more important than the other. They're all equal in importance in my mind. But Tubby's the only one that went to 2 Sweet 16s in a row. I mean, he's the only coach in the history of the school that went to the Sweet 16 2 years in a row. And so I'll catch up with Tubby and write about his place, And, at the time he was hired, Garen, I need to go back and verify this, but there were only about 6 or 7 black head coaches in the country in Division I basketball. And so Tubby was, and TU was way ahead of most schools in that with the hiring of Nolan, and then Tubby, and then Steve Robinson, Danny Manning, Frank Haith. Tulsa's had more black head basketball coaches than most major college programs. So, in fact, a lot of them, TU long before they hired Danny and Frank, were way ahead of most schools. So I want to write about Tubby's place, not only in TU history, but the city of Tulsa history. And, one of the most in my mind, one of the most significant sports figures in the history of the city and one of the most significant Black sports figures in the history of Tulsa. So, and plus it's just fun to talk to Tubby Smith. So it gives me a great justification to give him a call.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've learned. One of the first things I learned coming back to Tulsa 4 years ago now, 4 or 5, 4.5. That is, if you write about either Nolan Richardson or Tubby Smith, that's a no fail. People can't get enough about those two because they connected with both men when they were in the city, but they also represent a piece of Tulsa sports history, especially University of Tulsa sports history, that sort of feels, romantic almost, considering the sort of the malaise, not so much the accomplishment, the lack of accomplishment at T. We talked about this last week, Bill, but just the interest. It's just they galvanize the fan base and even outside the fan base, a lot of this city. Those two guys, and it's always good to hear that we're going to have something about either of those two men in the Tulsa world. So I look forward to that.
They put Tulsa basketball on the national map. And what I always appreciated about Tubby too is we would play weekly pickup games at the old Maybe gym, practice gym at TU, and Tubby would jump in there and run with us. He would. He's a pretty good player too, and a little bit of a dirty player, and it didn't like to lose. He did not like to lose. Not dirty in trying to hurt you, but dirty in he didn't want to go back to his office with an apple. That
never leaves a man.
He wasn't dirty. He was physical.
There you go. Yeah, he'll take kindly. He might answer to dirty. I mean, he might actually wear that as a badge of honor. So we'll look forward.
One of my favorite guys. And, one of the little great footnotes about the Tubby Smith years was that he actually, for a period of 2 hours, 3 hours, was the OU coach. I mean, he accepted that job with a handshake with Donnie Duncan. And then that was, I guess he didn't have a cell phone yet. Most of us didn't at that time. And that was after the 94 run. And he stops at the convenience store on the turnpike on his way back to Tulsa and calls from a landline, calls back to OU and says, I can't leave TU. I'm not leaving. Stays, goes back to the Sweet 16, gets the Georgia job, 2 years there, Kentucky. So I'd say he managed his path pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Worked out and that's one of those works out for both sides, right? Because that's when OU turned to Kelvin Sampson.
Okay.
That went pretty well.
Absolutely.
Went pretty well for both. So, all right, good stuff, Bill. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the viewers and listeners' time, and we'll be back again next week to do this again.